They called her Marielle, though it wasn't the name she had carried from the shores of her homeland. That name, the first one given to her, had been taken long before she could cling to its syllables. What she remembered instead was the echo of her mother's voice, the warmth of a home she would never see again, and the promise, made by women before her, that even the most battered seed could push through stone to grow toward light. Marielle arrived on the sprawling plantation of Colonel Abram Hensley, tucked deep in the American South, a place where moss hung low from ancient oaks, and where the cries of the enslaved were swallowed by fields stretching farther than the horizon. Hensley was known for two things: his wealth and the quiet cruelty with which he built it. Marielle was young when she was purchased, barely 15, still carrying the softness of girlhood in her cheeks. The plantation women whispered about her beauty, the warm, deep tone of her skin, the determined lift of her chin, the eyes that refused to dim even when everything around her tried to crush them. Hensley noticed too. And in the rigid, violent rules of that world, his notice was never a blessing. The women on the plantation had their own way of gathering, around fires, in sewing rooms, beneath the trees where shadows hid their faces. And every so often they spoke of Marielle, not just as another enslaved woman trapped under a white man's authority, but as someone who carried a quiet fire inside her. As the years passed, that fire became both her strength and her burden. Hensley forced her into the role of a breeder, a term used coldly by slaveholders who saw enslaved women not as human beings but as vessels for producing more enslaved laborers. And across decades, Marielle bore 27 children, each brought into a world shaped by the same oppression she endured. But what history books rarely show is how Marielle defied the world that tried to erase her. For every child she brought forth, she instilled stories, whispered at night, shared in lullabies woven into quiet moments. Stories of Africa. Stories of their ancestors. Stories of freedom sung beneath the moon. Her children were taken from her, some sold, some assigned to work in different parts of the estate, but she never let them forget who they were. She used every stolen moment to teach them, you belong to yourselves. You are more than what they made you. Survival is rebellion. And slowly her children, scattered, separated, reshaped by the hands of men, grew into a connected force of memory, love, and quiet resistance. This is not a story about a master. This is not a story about the cruelty of one man. This is the story of Marielle, and how a woman forced into motherhood through violence transformed each child into a carrier of her fire. This is the story of her strength, her legacy, and the 27 lives she shaped with love in a place where love was forbidden. Marielle's firstborn Isaac carried her eyes, wide, deep, and full of questions. Her second, Sarah, inherited her mother's steady hands. The third, Elijah, had her stubbornness, too powerful to be tamed. And so it continued, 27 children, each one bearing a piece of her despite the cruelty of their beginnings. But Marielle did not merely raise children. She raised witnesses. On plantations where enslaved families were routinely torn apart, Marielle fought with everything she had to keep her children connected. She carved tiny marks in the wooden posts of cabins to show where each child had lived. She traded scraps of cloth with other enslaved women to track which blankets had wrapped which baby. And she prayed. Not for miracles, miracles were in short supply, but for strength. Long after sunset, when the fields surrendered to the night and the overseers retreated to their cabins, Marielle would whisper her children's names under her breath, each one a prayer, a flame, a plea for survival. But the world around her was merciless. As soon as her sons were old enough to lift buckets or chop wood, they were taken. Daughters were given over to kitchen duty, laundry, or the house itself, where Hensley's gaze felt like a blade. Some children were sold outright, carted away in wagons, their small hands reaching back toward her as she screamed silently, knowing screams changed nothing. And yet, her legacy persisted. Marielle taught her children the power of memory, how knowing where you come from could keep your spirit from bending. She told them about the women in her village who braided maps into hair, who hid seeds in hems, who carried the stories of generations in their voices. Even if they take you from me, she whispered, they cannot take me from you. Her children grew with this truth woven into their bones. Some became quiet rebels. Some learned to read in secret. Some watched the overseers with eyes sharp enough to study their weaknesses. Some whispered escape routes. Marielle did not raise slaves. She raised a generation of survivors. Colonel Hensley believed himself untouchable, one of the wealthiest plantation owners in the region, a man whose fortune grew with every child Marielle bore. Records showed him boasting in letters about the increase in his stock. But Hensley, for all his power, feared something deeply. He feared control he did not own. Marielle's spirit unsettled him. While other enslaved women had long been crushed into silence, she carried herself with a terrifying calm he could not break. She did not look at him with defiance. Defiance could be beaten out. She looked at him with knowledge, the kind that said, "You may own my body, but you will never own my soul." Hensley tried everything to shatter her spirit. He assigned her the hardest labor. He sold her closest friends. He attempted to isolate her children. But every cruelty worked against him. The more he tried to break her, the more her children clung to the memory of her strength. When her 15th child, a quiet girl named Nara, was sent to the house, she carried her mother's lessons with her. She listened. She watched. She learned the layout of rooms, the patterns of footsteps, the times when keys were left unattended. Eventually, she passed this knowledge to her older siblings. By the time Marielle's 20th child was born, something had begun to shift. Her children, spread across cabins, fields, and distant farms, had formed a secret network. They shared information. They shared hope. They shared strategies. They waited for moments of weakness in the system that held them captive. Hensley did not know it, but the very woman he exploited had built the foundation for a quiet rebellion. And the roots of that rebellion were growing deeper every year. The breaking point came the year Marielle turned 50. Age had not softened her. Instead, it had sharpened her resolve. And it had brought something else. Her children were no longer children. Isaac was nearly 30. Sarah had 4 children of her own. Elijah, lean and strong, was known for his skill with tools. The younger children had grown into sharp-eyed teenagers, already carrying the weight of survival in their shoulders. And all of them, everyone, remembered her. Rumors had been circulating for months that Hensley planned to sell several of Marielle's children to cover debts. A sale meant one thing: permanent separation. On a humid night when storms pressed low against the sky, Marielle's children gathered behind the farthest cabin. Their faces were lit only by the flicker of lightning, their shadows stretching long across the dirt. They spoke in whispers, but their purpose was louder than thunder. They were not planning an escape that night. They were planning a preservation. It wasn't a revolt. Not an uprising. Not a burning or an attack. It was something quieter, something more powerful. A plan to reunite no matter what the world tried to take. Every child contributed. Nara shared the knowledge of the master's schedules. Elijah revealed the weaknesses in the far fence. Isaac had memorized the locations of nearby safe farms. Sarah provided names of abolitionists whispered by traveling traders. The older children mapped routes. The younger ones carried messages. This was not a rescue. It was the beginning of a family migration, one that would unfold over years, not nights. And it began with a promise spoken by Isaac. Mama kept us together when the world tried to pull us apart. Now it's our turn to keep her alive in all of us. The storm raged above them. But Marielle's legacy burned brighter. Years passed. And Marielle, the woman the world tried to break, lived long enough to see the beginnings of freedom. One by one, her children found their way out. Some through escape, some through manumission by abolitionist purchase, some through the chaos of the approaching Civil War which destabilized plantations across the South. And the most extraordinary part? They found each other. Across states. Across miles. Across rivers and borders and hostile towns. Her children, grown and determined, located siblings sold years earlier. They carried the stories their mother had taught them, the songs, the memories, the lineage. They had promised that they would remain a family. And they did. By the time freedom swept through the South, more than half of Marielle's children had reunited. The others were traced through church records, abolitionist letters, and migration routes after emancipation. And Marielle, frail but unbroken, saw something no enslaved mother was ever meant to see. Her children standing together, no longer shadows under another man's rule, but a family bound by love, memory, and survival. Her legacy lasted far beyond her lifetime. Her grandchildren grew into teachers, farmers, craftsmen, midwives, soldiers, and community leaders. They passed down her name, her story, and the truth of what she endured. Over generations, Marielle became more than a woman who bore 27 children for a cruel man. She became a root, a foundation, a testament to the resilience of Black motherhood. A symbol of how even in the darkest corners of history, love could grow, survive, and transcend chains. History tried to record her as property. But her descendants remembered her as a matriarch, a survivor, a warrior of the spirit, a woman whose strength shaped 27 lives and generations beyond. And today her name still echoes, not in the halls of the men who bought and sold her, but in the families who survived because of her, in the children who carried her fire, in the stories told now, honoring the woman she truly was. Marielle, the mother they could not break. As we close this story, remember that the lives we've shared today are not just stories, they are echoes of history that demand to be heard, remembered, and honored. Marielle's courage, resilience, and unwavering spirit are a testament to the strength of those who were silenced for centuries, yet refused to be erased. On Hidden Tales, our mission is to bring these untold narratives to light, to uncover the hidden corners of history, and to ensure that the bravery, suffering, and triumph of ordinary people resonates with the world today. If Marielle's story moved you, if it opened a window into a past too often ignored, we invite you to join our growing family of viewers who believe that history matters, not just in textbooks but in the lives and legacies of those who came before us. Subscribe to Hidden Tales, ring the notification bell, and step into a world where the hidden, the overlooked, and the extraordinary are finally brought into the light. Every story you witness here is a reminder that history is alive, and that your voice, your support, and your curiosity help us preserve the memories and lessons that time cannot erase. Share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and carry these stories forward, because when we honor the past, we empower the future. At Hidden Tales, the forgotten are remembered, the silenced are heard, and the extraordinary lives of ordinary people are celebrated. Join us and become part of the journey to uncover history's most compelling hidden tales.